Hi guys, it's me, Chazza HD, and welcome to the 10th Grand Prix of the season and a return to North America for the second time in 2025 for the Canadian Grand Prix weekend in Montreal, one of the best Grand Prix of any F1 season. We regularly have such brilliant races here. Normally, race of the year contender, year in, year out, we have here in Montreal. Last year's race was no different, an absolute classic around the streets of Montreal. And looking at the field so far, this weekend looks like we're in for yet another very competitive weekend. And yeah, cannot wait for this Canadian Grand Prix weekend. Obviously, qualifying and the race, as it both should be pretty exciting. Hope you guys are well after a couple weeks since the last Grand Prix in Spain. It does feel to me, anyway, like it's been quite a while since the last Grand Prix. I think it's because we had obviously the triple header where it felt like F1 was all the time, and now suddenly a 2 week break until this Grand Prix. Yeah, it's felt like a bit longer than 2 weeks to me, at least, to be honest. But yeah, great to be back for another Grand Prix, and let's hope this Grand Prix weekend delivers. I think a bit more than say what we had at the last one in Spain, which was not the greatest weekend. What happened in qualifying was kind of expected and not very exciting. And then what happened in the race, I mean, yeah, we had some controversy towards the end because of a late safety car, but other than that, wasn't really that great. So yeah, hopefully it can be a lot more exciting this weekend, and I think it will, because this track is obviously just so brilliant for creating exciting moments and exciting racing. But yeah, I hope you guys are well. Hope you've had a good 2 week break, as we're now in the middle of June. And I hope you guys, no matter what part of the world you're in, no matter the weather, whatever's going on in your part of the world, hope you're all having as best a time as possible. And I hope you'll be joining me tonight, at least for me, in watching along and enjoying qualifying in Montreal. Again, should be an exciting one. So yeah, hope you can enjoy and watch along this session with me. If you can't watch along the session though, and you can only listen along because you're busy with something else, don't worry, I'll keep you absolutely bang up to date with everything that goes on in this qualifying session. Coming up, as you can see, in an hour and 25 minutes. And as well, of course, there is a poll running in the live chat where I've asked you guys who will take pole position here in Montreal. Will it be one of the McLaren drivers, Oscar Piastri or Lando Norris, or will it be Max Verstappen or even George Russell in the Mercedes? Of course, Russell took pole at this Grand Prix last year and has looked pretty quick so far this weekend. So, yeah, let me know, who do you think takes pole position? And we will see who you guys have voted for by the time we get to the start of Q3 in about 2 hours and 10 minutes from now. And I'm sure it will be a close vote, because it is not a guarantee at all as to who is going to be on pole position. Of course, I've got my own favourites, but yeah, we'll have to end up seeing in the end who ends up actually taking it, because it is not an assured thing. Absolutely no doubt about that. But of course, in this build up to qualifying, we're going to go through the usual, looking at the data from yesterday, looking at obviously the sector time data as well, to understand why certain teams are quick and why certain teams are off the pace. And then, based off of all of that, I will get into my predictions for qualifying. Hopefully, you guys can give yours in the chat, not just for pole position, but for, say, the top 3 or top 5 on the grid. And then, obviously, eventually, we'll get into the session. I will also do a roundup of the teams and just round up where all the teams should be aiming for, or what they should be aiming for position-wise in this session, given the performance level they're all showing this weekend. So, let's get into the data, let's say, from yesterday, and we'll start obviously, by going through the results of practice 2. And George Russell, like he was a few times this time last year at this Grand Prix, topping the session. Mercedes definitely look a bit stronger than, firstly, I was expecting, but a bit stronger than they've been in the last couple Grand Prix, which is good to see, because I didn't have really that greater hopes for Mercedes coming into this week. And I didn't think they'd be terrible, but I didn't think they'd be top 3 material, to be honest. I thought they would be more so around 5th place, maybe 4th at best. So good to see that they are a step ahead of where I was expecting. Lando Norris second. Norris came out after practice and said McLaren had their worst Friday of the year, which is interesting because I was pretty confident looking at these results yesterday that McLaren were sandbagging a bit, and I still think to a degree they are. But I don't think Lando is completely lying or anything like that. I think maybe he is exaggerating quite a bit that it was the worst Friday of the year for them. But yeah, McLaren, I'm still pretty confident in what they've got. I don't think they're probably as far ahead of the others as probably we would have expected coming into this weekend, but I think they're still the favourites for pole position. Antonelli in third, just confirming that Mercedes have got a quick car. And then Alexander Albon, fourth for Williams. Williams have been very quick all weekend. They have looked very good, have the Williams team, which is not really a surprise because this circuit is going to suit their car. Their car is pretty good in slow speed corners and down the straights, pretty handy as well. So it's not a surprise Williams are quick, but this quick, definitely a bit of a surprise that they are, mixing it in the top 5 so far. Fernando Alonso 5th, doing a great job there for Aston Martin. Alonso definitely looks like top 10 material this weekend. Oscar Piastri 6th. Piastri also quite slow in practice 3. Definitely needs to get his act together. Piastri also did hit the wall of champions in practice 3. Got a puncture. So yeah, Piastri not having a good weekend so far. As long as Oscar secures, especially if George Russell and Mercedes are as competitive as they look, if they continue that into qualifying, then as long as Piastri gets in the top 3 in qualifying, I think that will still be good enough. Because I think in the race, then McLaren will probably dominate. But yeah, Piastri needs to make sure that he doesn't end up, in the, say, back end of the top 10, because making your way through the pack in this or at this circuit, not as easy as it seems, even though there are a couple DRS zones and also quite a few straights. The track is still quite narrow, especially for these wide cars. And as well, the McLaren usually is not very quick in a straight line, so you don't want to be having to do a ton of overtaking if you're Oscar Piastri. So yeah, he needs to make sure at least he's top 3 on the grid so that he can get still a good enough result from this Grand Prix. Carlos Sainz 7th. Sainz can definitely do better than that. He was ahead of Albon, I'm pretty sure, in practice 1, so there is more performance from Carlos Sainz, I think, yet to come. I think he could do a couple tenths of a second better than that. Lewis Hamilton in 8th. Ferrari did not have a good day yesterday. They have, though, shown a lot more pace in practice 3, where they were 2nd and 4th, but I'm not sure really how legitimate that pace is. I'm not saying that they're not going to show that pace in qualifying. Maybe they will. Would be great if they did, because that would be significantly better than I think most people's expectations of where they would be this weekend. But yeah, to me, they don't look like they're, I wouldn't say they're looking poor, but I wouldn't say they're looking that good either overall. I think when qualifying, when it really comes down to it, I don't think Ferrari will be in the top 3 on the grid. I'd be quite surprised if they were able to pull that off. Max Verstappen, ninth. Verstappen complaining about his car and the balance. We know Verstappen will improve on that. For qualifying, I think Max definitely will be in the top 5 on the grid. But also for Max, similar to the Ferraris, I think a top 3, I honestly, at this point, I think is a slight bit too far for him to be able to have here in qualifying, because as long as both McLaren drivers do their jobs, they should be in the top 3, obviously. And looking at Mercedes with George Russell, I don't see why Russell won't be in the top 3 either. So it's going to take something quite special, I think, for Max to be top 3 on the grid, or even, dare I say, on the front row of the grid. Max really needs to be, at worst, in qualifying today, 3rd for his championship. But again, not looking realistic he's going to be able to do that. Liam Lawson then completing the top 10. Racing Bulls look decently quick, but I don't think overall will be quick enough to make the top 10. I just don't think Racing Bulls have quite got enough in hand to be top 10 runners. As you can see, 0.3 of a second off Aston Martin and Williams, who are clearly ahead of them this weekend. Not really a surprise that Racing Bulls are a bit further off the pace. This circuit is a bit more of a power circuit. Racing Bulls' strengths are through the corners, and there's not a ton of them here this weekend. Plus, Racing Bulls like faster corners, and again, here in Montreal, there is not a lot of those. So, yeah, Racing Bulls, I think, are there to capitalize on any surprise poor performances by any of the teams ahead of them: Mercedes, McLaren, Red Bull, Ferrari, Williams, and Aston Martin. But yeah, Racing Bulls probably will be 11th, 12th on the grid, something like that. And then for the back half of the order, yeah, Isaac Hadjar just behind his teammate Lawson. Gasly in 12th, doing the best he can. The Alpine not very quick this weekend. Bortoletto just at Hulkenberg in 13th. I think Sauber could maybe grab an 11th place in qualifying, but I'd be very surprised if they snuck into the top 10. They're not miles away from the top 10, but I just don't think ultimately there is enough pace there. I think they've got probably a quarter of a second to make up if they wanted to make the top 10, but I don't think they'll be able to make that up, unfortunately. Yuki Tsunoda 15th. I think Tsunoda will be better than that in qualifying, but I don't think Tsunoda will make the top 10, unfortunately. Behrman then 16th, Ocon 17th, Haas just not quick. The slowest team, quite clearly, this weekend. Franco Colapinto, again, 1 second slower than Gasly, around a track that is pretty short, and there's just no excuse to be that far off the pace. So, yeah, Colapinto must step it up, or, yeah, they're going to have to throw him out of that car because he is just not doing anywhere near well enough. And, again, as we said a couple of weeks ago in Spain, Jack Doohan, whilst he was not great, he was nowhere near this bad. Absolutely nowhere near this bad. And then Lance Stroll only did a couple laps in practice. I wasn't able to see actually what the issue was for him. But with Charles Leclerc, he crashed at turn, was it 3 and 4? The area where Sebastian Vettel famously went off track in 2019 and rejoined, according to the FIA, unsafely. Leclerc went left and into the barriers in practice 1 and damaged his chassis. So Leclerc was not able to do practice 2. Poor mistake from Leclerc, I must say. Not just having the accident, but damaging your car to that point. Yeah, he looked quick in practice 3, but missing out on practice 2, that might be quite costly for him, especially when it comes to the race, in terms of making sure his setup is exactly what it needs to be. So yeah, that was poor, honestly, from Charles. So Ferrari, I think, could have done better in practice 2 if Leclerc had competed, but again, I don't think Ferrari would have been, first or second or anything like that. But let's get into the sector time data to understand why the pecking order is the way it is. First sector is really all about downforce. You've got McLaren, the quickest team, no surprise there. They have the best car through the corners. Williams then second best, and the reason I think that is because, again, in the slow speed corners, they have, or the slow and medium speed corners, I say to an extent, they have a really good car. They have all season. And I think that's why they are just so quick in the first sector. Racing Bulls, surprising how quick they are in this part of the lap. Aston Martin looking good as well. Obviously very close in this part of the lap because it's only 20 seconds long. Mercedes doing absolutely fine. Maybe you could say half a tenth closer they could be to McLaren, but I think they're doing absolutely fine for lap time. Red Bull, though, definitely can improve by maybe a tenth of a second in this part of the lap. The Red Bull, though, we know in slower speed corners does not handle very well compared to the high speed corners. We've seen that this season quite a bit. And then you've got Alpine. Ferrari, yes, 8th best team here, but that's with Lewis Hamilton, which I can't quite believe I'm going to say this, but Lewis is not the quickest Ferrari driver. If Leclerc had been in this session, I think Ferrari would have been probably in between Mercedes and Red Bull at worst. So yeah, Ferrari, they're not doing that great in the first sector here, but it's not, it's not absolutely diabolical. That's for sure. And then Haas and then Sauber, quite far off in the first sector, not quite sure why. If they can improve on that by a couple tenths, then Sauber might actually be able to be, right on the cusp of a top 10. The middle sector is relatively simple. You've got a left-right chicane, which is a bit slow. Then you've got a straight where DRS is activated. Then you brake hard for another little chicane, which is, I would say, of medium speed. And then you are hard on the accelerator up until the middle sector time being, which is right before you brake hard for the hairpin. And Williams, again, with those slower corners, the quickest team, actually, in the middle sector. Quite surprised that they are the quickest. McLaren, you would have expected to be the quickest, but I think also the straights in the middle sector helping Williams to a degree. Mercedes looking good as well. Aston Martin as well, quite impressive. Ferrari, again, if Leclerc was in the car, I think Ferrari would be probably right in there with McLaren. So I think Ferrari's middle sector pace is absolutely fine. Red Bull, though, can definitely improve, probably by another tenth here. Sauber looking a lot better. Racing Bulls quite a bit further off. Again, top speed is not their strength, let's say. And only slightly ahead they are of Haas and Alpine. And then the final sector is actually the longest sector on the track. But at this circuit, all the sectors are really equally as important as each other. There is no, I wouldn't say there is a sector that is the most important, absolutely. The first sector obviously is very important for getting your lap, underway in a good way. And if you do, set a very good first sector for whatever pace you're doing, then yeah, it's a good start. But you have to be nailing it through all parts of the lap. You cannot have, say, a really good first sector and then a average middle and final sector and get away with it. You have to be on it through all parts of the lap, which is why we love this track, because it really does, for me, show who the top drivers are from, say, the not-so-top drivers, because it really, you have to be super consistent through a qualifying lap. George Russell, though, the quickest in the final sector. Mercedes showing a good top speed, and or not just in the final sector, but as we saw in the middle sector as well. And obviously the final sector, you've got the hairpin, then a long straight, and then the final chicane, which is pretty quick, and then another DRS straight to the finish line. So mostly it is about power, and Mercedes and McLaren at the top of the timesheets. Red Bull a couple tenths away. Red Bull have been looking good in the speed trap so far this weekend, but they're just not able to show that in lap time. If Max can find another at least 10th of a second in this part of the lap, then it would put Red Bull close enough to start competing with Mercedes to a degree. But I do get the feeling there is definitely a bit more pace in the bag for Red Bull. Not to the point where they're going to be fighting for pole position, but they'll be certainly a lot better than ninth place. No doubt about that. Racing Bulls, very strong in the final sector, which is a surprise. Maybe had a bit of a slipstream, not quite sure, but yeah, that is surprising. Sauber, then the next best, ahead of Aston Martin, Alpine. Williams, surprising in how slow they are in the final sector, given how quick they were, obviously, in the first two sectors. If they could improve on that by, say, a 10th of a second or so, then I think Williams do have a legitimate chance at getting a car in the top 5 on the grid, maybe even the top 4. That Williams, do not count it out. It is very, very strong this weekend. Ferrari, again, if they had Leclerc in the car, I think they'd be a tad stronger in this part of the lap. But I do think Ferrari were, with their power units, sandbagging a bit more than others to a degree. So Ferrari will be better in this part of the lap in qualifying, no doubt about it. And then Haas, slightly slower than the Works Ferrari team. But overall, if we come back to the top 10 from practice 2, which is the most representative session we've had so far this weekend, Mercedes are looking very good. There is no doubt about that. And they will be fighting for pole position today. I don't think I, again, can deny that, given how quick they look. But ultimately, I still think McLaren, once everything's turned up and the drivers are on it, I still think McLaren are the favourites for pole. And I think by maybe a couple tenths of a second, I think they are still clear of the next best team, being probably Mercedes. Russell, though, because he is so special over a qualifying lap, I think he will be able to keep it close with Norris and Piastri and fight properly for pole. But ultimately, I think that McLaren is just a slight bit too quick for the Mercedes car. So McLaren, I think, will be the quickest team. Mercedes second, definitely. Third, very hard to say, honestly, who the third best team is going to be. Because Ferrari definitely will improve. Obviously, Red Bull will. Williams look good. Honestly, I think the third best team is probably going to be, if they can keep up what they were doing from yesterday, I think the third best team is probably Williams. And the reason I say that is because the advantage that Red Bull and Ferrari have is that they've got superstar level drivers in their car. If Williams had Leclerc or Verstappen in that car, Williams, I think, would be not fighting for pole, but I think they could legitimately fight for a top 3 on the grid. But because they've got Sainz and Albon, two very good drivers still, but not elite, that's what puts them a slight bit further back. But I genuinely think Williams have got the third best car this at least in this qualifying session. And I would say they are just about ahead of probably Red Bull. I think are slightly quicker than Ferrari. I just trust that Red Bull have just got a slightly better car through the corners than what Ferrari do. See, I go Red Bull 4th, Ferrari 5th, Aston Martin 6th, and then 7th, probably Racing Bulls, and then Sauber 8th, Alpine 9th, and Haas definitely, you have to say, are the slowest team. It'd be surprising if they get a car into Q2. So yeah, pecking order-wise, that's what I would say it is. And again, outside of, say, McLaren and maybe Mercedes, it is going to be very exciting and very close in qualifying today. Do not miss this session because it is going to be, there's going to be many surprises and a very mixed up grid for tomorrow's Canadian Grand Prix, which I cannot wait for. Remember as well, that Pirelli, the tyre supplier, of course, have brought the 3 softest compounds this weekend: the C6, the C5, and the C4. The C6 compound this weekend has been pretty bad in terms of hanging on through the lap, just for a qualifying lap. So we could get in Q3 2 or 3 cars on the C5, which is the medium compound, to do their best qualifying laps. And that might make the difference between, say, 5th on the grid or 3rd on the grid. You don't know. So, yeah, we are in for a very close, exciting, and probably surprising qualifying session here in Montreal. Obviously, that tyre situation makes it very interesting for tomorrow, where I think we're guaranteed at least a 2-stop race. One, because of the softness of the tyres, but secondly, or actually for 3 reasons. One, the softness of the tyres. Secondly, the weather. It's a hot and sunny weekend in Montreal. And thirdly, the pit lane loss from pitting is the shortest here in Montreal compared to every other track on the calendar. You only lose, I think, 17, 18 seconds from pitting. So yeah, it should be a guaranteed 2-stop race, maybe even a 3-stop race for certain cars tomorrow. So yeah, we are in for a very exciting weekend. But here is my qualifying prediction, which is a bit wild in certain areas, but I'm going for it, let's say. Lando Norris, I think, will take pole position. Not by much, a 10th of a second. I think it'll be over George Russell. But again, ultimately, I think McLaren just have a bit too much in hand. Mercedes will be second with George Russell. Oscar Piastri's not having a great weekend, but I still think he will be in the top 3. I think he'll deliver a good enough lap to finish up in 3rd. Max Verstappen, I think, just about through his own amazing speed, will get 4th, even though the Red Bull car probably isn't quick enough to deserve to be there. And then in 5th place, I am going Carlos Sainz for Williams. I think he'll deliver here in qualifying, and I think he will deliver a great lap and put himself right in the mix in 5th, just out of the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc. Antonelli, I'm going in 7th. Albon in 8th. As you can see there with my lap time prediction in terms of the gap to the top 10, I think it'll be very close between Verstappen in 4th and Hamilton in 10th. And then, yeah, Alonso, I'm going 9th. And Lewis Hamilton, I'm going to go in P10. Yeah, Ferrari, I don't think will be that quick in qualifying. Plus, with Lewis Hamilton, I don't trust him to be delivering in this session because he has just not been delivering at all in the last few qualifying sessions. So that's my prediction. Again, and I think outside of the top 3, it is wild. But if you look at the grid for last year's Canadian Grand Prix, that was quite wild as well. We had Daniel Ricciardo 5th in the Racing Bulls, Alonso 6th. I remember Tsunoda was 8th as well. We had both Ferraris miss the top 10. So it is definitely possible here to have a wild, surprising qualifying order. We'll see, though, ultimately, if that's what we get. So yeah, that's my prediction. Let me know, guys, in the live chat, though, whether you agree or disagree. And let me just go back to this screen quickly, as we have got an hour to go until qualifying is underway. And I'll sync up the timer in a moment once the next minute ticks over to 8 o'clock my time. So there is currently a support race going on, by the way, at the Circuit de Gilles Villeneuve, and it is the F1 Academy. Having a decent race by the looks of it out there at the moment. There you go. 1 hour to go until qualifying is underway. By the way, good to see a good amount of people here. And for everyone here, make sure to smash the like button if you haven't already. 13 likes we're on. Let's try and get up to, say, 25 or 30 likes plus if we can in the next half an hour. That'd be great if we could do that. Also, if you are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe for more content like this, because for the next few races, we will be doing both a qualifying and race watch along. I'll be doing that for yeah, the next Grand Prix in Austria, the Grand Prix after that, which is the British Grand Prix at Silverstone, and then the Grand Prix after that is the Belgian Grand Prix at Spa. For those next 3 races coming up after this weekend's Grand Prix will be, again, both a qualifying and race watch along. So if you want to keep absolutely up to date with everything going on in Formula One, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Bottom right of the screen, you can do it right there, or just click my channel name and go to my channel homepage and subscribe there. Hello to Rux, good to see you, mate. As we've got a super chat from Mark Ceruro, I think it is, for 5, Canadian dollars. That is. Thank you for sending that in. Much appreciated. Says, hi Jazza, there is a video you uploaded a few years back stating Leclerc should leave Ferrari. Do you still stand by that? Yeah, I would, because even though Ferrari, last year were close to winning the Constructors, and if they had just sorted out their development last season a bit more, then maybe Leclerc could have actually had a proper championship bid for the drivers' championship. Ferrari lately have been maybe a bit stronger than I've expected. But if you look at this year, Ferrari yet again have been a massive disappointment. And if you look at the new era that we're going to be going into next year, 2026, from what we're hearing, Ferrari are not going to be one of the top teams. I'm not saying Ferrari are going to be terrible, but what we're hearing doesn't sound great. So, yeah, if I was Leclerc, and there has actually been rumours of this in the last 2 weeks since the last Grand Prix, that Leclerc is looking for a new team possibly for the next, maybe to join in a couple years' time. I'm sure Leclerc must have some kind of exit clause in his contract. I think Leclerc still should leave the Ferrari team, because even though they've shown some improvement in the last year or so, mostly last year, Ferrari still have not shown that they can be reliable enough to give Leclerc what he needs to fight for a championship, when Mercedes, Red Bull, and McLaren out there have shown to be a lot more reliable. So I think Leclerc, if he truly wants to win the championship, then I think he does need to leave Ferrari, because even though, yes, I know he's been with Ferrari, for a long time, it's his boyhood team and it's his team without doubt. And, he dreams of winning a championship at Ferrari. Many people have dreamed of winning a championship at Ferrari, but many people have failed. Alain Prost, Nigel Mansell, Sebastian Vettel, Fernando Alonso, all these great drivers went to Ferrari, and Ferrari did not, mostly did not give them what they needed to get the job done. A couple of those drivers didn't exactly do the best they could at certain times, but again, mostly it was Ferrari not doing a good enough job. So, I think Leclerc, again, if he really wants to win the championship, then he's got to leave. But if he is so committed to this idea of winning the championship with Ferrari, then stay at Ferrari. But I think I could see him being one of those drivers that never wins a championship because of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Because if he leaves Ferrari, there's a chance that by the time he leaves Ferrari, that it'll be 2029 or 2030. By then, he might not be necessarily the hottest property on the grid in terms of other top teams who they're looking at to sign for their team. So he might not end up, if he does leave Ferrari by then, which is in quite a few years from now, he might not end up in a better situation, because by then, I mean, Max Verstappen will still be kicking around, and obviously Max is better than Leclerc. And if he's available for any team, then he's obviously the one that everyone will be after. But, you've got Antonelli, who by then could be on Max's level, who might be very highly sought after. So, yeah. I still think if he can, he should leave that team. Because I think, let's say, at the end of 2026, he decides and he can contractually leave the Ferrari team for 2027 and go to a team that is, at the time, a lot more competitive and looking a lot more hopeful for the future. By then, he would, that's long enough for Ferrari to get their act together to give this guy good enough cars to win a championship. We have to remember, Leclerc has been with Ferrari since the start of 2019. That was 6 years ago. He's been with them quite a while. If you look at all the other top drivers, I mean, Lando Norris, he came into Formula One with McLaren in 2019. That's how long ago it was. Oscar Piastri, who could be world champion this year, wasn't even in F3, I don't think, in 2019. Or if he was, it was his first season in F3. That's how long ago 2019 was. Lewis Hamilton was, I think, going into 2019, was a 5-time champion. Max Verstappen obviously had no world championships back then, and had only had I don't even think Max had 10 race wins to his name in Formula One. I think he only had about 6. Point I'm trying to make is that Leclerc, since he's been at that team, it was a long time ago. And again, Ferrari have had long enough to give this guy, who is clearly good enough to be a world champion if given a good enough team and car, he's given them long enough, and they have continuously failed this man. And eventually you've got to look for for a better opportunity. Lewis Hamilton, I think in that video that you're talking about, I did mention, obviously, Lewis Hamilton and McLaren, where similar situation, where Lewis was with McLaren, obviously his boyhood teams, similar to Leclerc, but he still decided to go to Mercedes, and eventually, not eventually, but after just over a year, it paid off, and is still, and probably will always be, the greatest driver move in history. When everyone at the time, when it was announced, everyone said it was a crazy decision. And again, turned out to be the best decision of all time. The difference is, though, is Lewis still won a championship at McLaren and still decided to leave for a better opportunity. So, there's no reason for Leclerc to continue being as loyal as he is. Another good example is Kimi Räikkönen. He was at McLaren for, 5 seasons, and then I think during 2005, because McLaren, even though they gave him a fast enough car, it was a very unreliable car. Kimi eventually decided, you know what? I need to move to a different team if I want to win a championship, and that's exactly what he did. And surprise, surprise, in his first year with a new team, he won his only championship. So again, if Leclerc wants to be a champion, then he will have to leave that team, because I'm not saying Ferrari won't win a championship in the next few years, but the chances are that they won't. I would be a lot more confident betting on Red Bull, McLaren, Mercedes, and maybe even Aston Martin to win a championship than Ferrari, because Ferrari have just continuously disappointed us for the last 17, 18 years. So, yeah, thanks for the super chat. But yeah, I still think Leclerc should leave. And even if, he does leave and he goes to Mercedes and it doesn't work out, at least he would have tried to, make the move to possibly get him some championships. But if he stays at Ferrari his whole career, which I don't think he will, but if he does, let's say he somehow does that, if you're Leclerc, yeah, you could complain that, oh, well, Ferrari never gave me a good enough car, but then in return, we can all say, well, you never looked to move to a different team. Why didn't you? So he's got to have that conversation with himself of, how important is a world championship to me? We'll see what his future holds. Again, wouldn't be surprised if he was racing with a different team, say within the next 6 years, but as to what team that will be, or, when he'll make that decision to leave Ferrari, we'll have to see. Right, let's go through some of your comments in chat. AJ says, what happened to the Red Bull looked fine on Friday? Well, I think you might be talking about practice 1, where I think was Max quickest in practice 1. I think he was. But yeah, practice 2, yeah, the handling apparently was not good enough, which is why there was quite a drop off. But practice 1 is not a representative session at all, so there's no point paying attention to it. Crystal Racing, good to see you, says or asks, did Lawrence Stroll force his son to race this weekend? With Ben Lentz, it's never looked like he wants to be there since 2017. I don't know, but I don't know, I'm just a bit perplexed with what's been going on with Stroll this season, because he started really well, had 2 really good races, and then he has just been absolutely nowhere since then. And then suddenly, after what was it? There was a dispute he had, a physical dispute he had with someone in the team. Suddenly, he can't race in the race because of a hand injury. Now, maybe, yeah, it is legitimate and it was, hurting him, but I'm not the biggest believer, to be honest. But if it's legit, then fine. But I think it's just excuses at this point. The reason Lance Stroll is performing like he is because this is who he is. He's not a good Formula 1 driver. And I am tired of even having to talk about the guy, because it's exactly what I said in that video that I made, and it was at the end of 2023, a year and a half ago. Everything I said in that video still applies. He will have one great race every so often, and everyone will be like, oh, Stroll, he's such a good driver, and da-da-da-da-da. And yeah, he turns into Ayrton Senna when when rain starts to fall on track. But 80% of the time, he's absolutely nowhere, doing absolutely nothing. I'm just tired of the guy being in Formula 1 when I don't think he's really bothered about what really happens, to be honest, as Lance. I don't think he's, I don't think he really cares that much. And that's the result of knowing that you're never going to be dropped from a team because your dad is the owner and person running the team. So, yeah. By the way, let's try and get these likes up as we're on, 17 likes. I can see we've got quite a few in here now. So, yeah, let's try and get up to, say, 30 plus likes if we can in these next 20 minutes. What does everyone make of the rumours of Vasseur being sacked at Maranello? That was Crystal Racing that asked that. I have not seen those rumours. I've seen that Vasseur has come out with some interesting comments about how, what was it? The problem with the team, it's not the drivers, it's not this, it's not that. There is one common denominator. But I don't know exactly who he is referencing with that. If he's referencing the president of Ferrari, which is now John Elkann, he would be wrong in that because it's not like Elkann has been the team president since 2009. We had De Montezemolo, and then it was Marchioni for a few years, and then it's been Elkann ever since. So it's not like it's been the same guy ever since then. But I still think with Ferrari, I still think it comes down to fundamentally their hiring practices as to why they don't win championships. I think their engineering base is way too homegrown, which I'm sure, yeah, it's great to boast about that, but when it comes to winning championships, homegrown talent is not going to get the job done. Getting the job done is hiring the best people you can for all the particular important roles within a team. That's obviously why Ferrari dominated Formula One in the 2000s, because they had the best, or not the best, but one of the best designers, the best strategist, the best team boss, best driver, etc. When Ferrari have not had that for obviously the last 17 years, because again their hiring practices have been very homegrown, which again, as I said, it's a great thing to boast about, but when it comes down to winning championships, it's not going to get the job done. Look at the teams that have won championships since then. They've been teams who have had the best personnel they could possibly have in those positions, regardless of nationality or homegrown talent or whatever. Red Bull are a great example of that. Obviously, Mercedes, fantastic example of that. So, ultimately, like I said, I think it's still the hiring practices of Ferrari, but yeah, we'll see what happens with Fred. I don't think he should be sacked from Ferrari. I think he should be given until the start of next season, at least. We'll see where Ferrari are at, but yeah, I think sacking him now would be premature. Let me find some other comments here. Good to see a good amount of you. I think Mark Ferris in the chat was trying to say Stroll just sucks, and yeah. Rook saying you might want to clip the Sunset Clouds and post it a separate video. I could do that, but I do have a video. I will be uploading a video on Ferrari soon. Probably before the summer break. It might even be in the next couple of weeks before we get to the Austrian Grand Prix. Depends what happens this weekend. But yeah, there is a video on Ferrari coming probably in the next month, I would say. And obviously it's going to be on, why 2025 has been a failure. And what we're going to try and do is examine actually why has it been a failure, rather than just talking points. I'm going to actually look at, what the team have said in regards to the handling and the technical development, which is really, that's what it comes down to in terms of why Ferrari have been off the pace this season. It's simply not having a good enough car. So yeah, there will be a Ferrari video in the next coming in the next month. We'll see exactly when. Also, another thing I want to quickly announce is, and this won't be, I don't think I'll be doing this yet, but in July, we do have a 3-week break in between the British Grand Prix and the Belgian Grand Prix at Spa. Now, in that 3-week break, there won't be probably a lot of content, and the reason is because, and I am kind of starting it now, but it will be a lot more so, I'll be doing it in July, is I am getting content ready, of course, for the summer break, which is, it feels a long way away, but it's not. It's only, what, 7 weeks away, I think, the summer break. So yeah, I am just getting that ready because I want to make sure, obviously, there are videos and content on the channel during the summer break, because my plans for August is to have August not totally off, but I want to have as much of August off as I can, because obviously I've just finished my 3rd year at university and I deserve a proper, few weeks break, given how hard I've worked. And also, I am probably going to be going to university, to a new university in September, hopefully. So, yeah. So I'm going to try and get at least 3, maybe 4 videos ready for the summer break. One of them will be more of a historical video, and then probably at least a couple of them will be current, to do with, current matters, let's say. As absolutely crazy ending to the F1 Academy race. Absolutely everyone side by side, but eventually there has been a winner. But yeah, so that's the plan going forward. Nice news regarding Unichatter. Cheers for that. Yeah, I am pretty glad that I have finished uni. I finished uni about what was it, 3 days after the Spanish Grand Prix. So yeah, I've not been very um efficient work wise since then, because obviously I've had a big weight lifted off my shoulders, having finally got the year done. And obviously this year that I've just done was the BA honors year. So yeah, was tough. Got through it, and I believe I will get a good grade. And I should find out my results in, I think, about a month from now, I think it is, or maybe just under a month from now is when we get our results. And then, yeah, and then it's straight on to applying for then a master's, which hopefully I'll be doing for the next couple years. But yeah, like I said, I've not been very efficient work-wise since then, because I've just been, well, a lot more so catching up on sleep. that I've missed out on quite a bit in the last, few months. But yeah, happy to have got it done, and we'll see what the results are in a few weeks' time. But my main focus, obviously, until the Masters course possibly comes around in September, is going to be this channel. So yeah, I will be trying to produce as much content as I can. And yeah, hopefully I'll be doing a few bits over the summer break as well. Crystal Racing says, being Ferrari driver, even with no title wins, gives you a certain status in motorsport. Kvyat, Lawson, and Sonoda are not getting a special status by racing for Red Bull. True. Yeah, Ferrari are never going to have trouble hiring elite drivers. I mean, again, look at the last 17 years. They've had better drivers in these last 17 years than they did during the last drought they had, which was what, between 1983 and 99, which was what, 16 years? If you look at the drivers they had in that period, it was what, Rene Arnoux, Alboreto, Johansson, Prost, Mansell, Berger, Alesi, Capelli, Morbidelli. But, look at the last 17 years, and they've had Vettel, Alonso, Raikkonen, Massa, Leclerc, Sainz, Hamilton. I mean, in terms of world championships, they've had 14 world championships combined racing in that car since they last won a championship. Yet, they haven't won a championship. I wonder why. Right, let me find some other comments that I've not quite that I haven't quite got to yet. Let me just scroll up a bit. Hello to Yanni. Says hello everyone. Hello Chaz. Good to see you. And Anshaw says this came from the Le Mans stream, and boy, Ferrari is dominating the Red Bull did in 2023. 1, 2, and 3. Wish Ferrari was the same here. Yeah, that's the funny thing is in WEC. I know that annoys some people that we call it WEC, but that's what it is. That series. Yeah, in that series, Ferrari are doing absolutely brilliantly, but in F1 are still disappointing us. Why don't Ferrari, and maybe they are already doing this, I don't know, I've not researched into this, but why don't Ferrari look at maybe taking certain people from their WEC team? Because clearly what they're doing over there is working. So, why not bring maybe a couple important people over? I'm not saying the drivers, I'm saying, engineer-wise or team personnel-wise outside of the drivers. Because, as Anne Schultz just said in the chat, Ferrari are doing very well at Le Mans right now, and have been doing pretty well in that series in the last year or so, I believe. So yeah, it is quite funny how that's happening. But yeah, hopefully overall for Ferrari, it will be a good weekend motorsport-wise, but we all know that even, if they win Le Mans, that's great. Obviously, Ferrari, it's very important to them to win such historical races. But we all know Formula One is still the one they most care about, and the one that, if they could sacrifice everything possible to win championships in Formula One, they would. We all know that. Anyway, before I read any more comments, I just want to quickly post a link of the stream out one final time, as we have got just under half an hour now to go until qualifying is underway in Montreal, hot and sunny Montreal. No worries about the weather like there was last year, even though it allowed for an amazing race. Come join us here to watch along the what do you call it? Qualifying in Montreal. And hopefully we'll get some more people hopping on soon enough. But I think let me just read this comment quick. Crystal Racing saying WEC allows far more experimentation, but knowing Ferrari, their best engineers accidentally went to their WEC team. Exactly. And also Crystal Racing saying, I find it very difficult to judge Leclerc's career if he never becomes champion, a potential case of loyalty gone wrong. Yeah, it absolutely would be a case of loyalty gone wrong. The thing is, though, we've never really had, if you look at Formula One history and people that should have won a championship or should have won more than what they did, it's never really been down to being too loyal. Like for Sterling Moss, for example, the reason Sterling Moss never won a championship was not because of loyalty. It was because somehow he just never ended up in the right team at the right time, and it never just clicked properly, for him to get what he deserved. And let's be honest, Sterling Moss deserved to win probably a couple championships. He was a great driver, but it just never fell into place. I'm trying to think of other teams where too much loyalty has cost the driver, but yeah, it's hard to think of any real cases. Yeah. So we'll see what happens. But like I said, I do think Leclerc eventually, whether it's in the next couple years or even in 5 years' time, eventually Leclerc will leave Ferrari. He's not going to race for them for his entire career. No way. That is, never going to happen. Especially with so many other options out there for, teams that can win championships, like McLaren, like Red Bull, Mercedes, and maybe Aston Martin will join that party. And we cannot obviously forget Audi. Who knows what they're going to do? Maybe in 10 years' time, Audi could be dominating Formula One, and Leclerc could be one of those drivers winning the championship. You don't know. One thing that is clear is Leclerc, he is going to be in Formula One for a long time. I think he'll probably be, next at least 10 years, maybe 15 at the most. So he's still got quite a bit of time. Thankfully, has the Monegasque. Anyway, before I read out any more comments, and make sure to keep them coming, guys. Some absolutely brilliant comments I've gone through so far. Just going to quickly go through the teams, do a quick roundup of where they're at, pecking order-wise, and where they should be aiming position-wise in this session, which is only 25 minutes around the corner. So let's start with McLaren. And pole position in the front row is obviously what McLaren should be aiming for basically every race weekend. The front row, though, not as easy to get here as it was in the last Grand Prix in Spain. The other teams are a bit closer to them than they were at the Spanish Grand Prix, but ultimately, as I said earlier, I still think McLaren have got the best car in qualifying trim by probably at most a couple tenths of a second. It's all down again, as I usually say with McLaren, to the drivers. As long as the drivers deliver good enough laps in Q3, which is not always the case, as we've seen with Lando Norris and even Oscar Piastri at times. As long as the drivers deliver good enough laps, pole position should be theirs. Again, whether they get the front row or not, Depends on how George Russell does, how maybe a couple other drivers perform as well. So we will see. But McLaren, they are the favourites for pole. And if they do get pole, I'm afraid they are going to very comfortably win the Grand Prix this weekend. For Red Bull, it's going to be a tough session. They have to be thankful as well that Max Verstappen is in that car, because without Verstappen, Red Bull would be nowhere near, I think, the top 5 on the grid. But with Max in the car, it's possible. And I think they will get in the top 5 because Max Verstappen is just so great. Verstappen, I predicted to finish up in 4th, but I think personally that is, no pun intended, the absolute max he can do in qualifying, because that car simply is just not good enough to be in the top 3 on the grid here, which is a big disappointment for Max, because for his championship, really, he needs to be in the top 3 on the grid here for tomorrow's race, because obviously now 49 points behind in the championship, he really needs to start producing the results to keep himself in play. Not because his results lately have not been good enough because of him. Obviously, it's still mostly down to the car. Obviously, we know in Spain, losing those few extra points was down to him. But it's getting to that point of the season where if he loses another 20 or 30 points, he's going to be pretty much out of championship contention. So Max, if he can somehow get in the top 3, brilliant. That would be good enough. But realistically, if F1 delivers their best laps, I don't think it's possible, I'm afraid, for Red Bull and Verstappen. Ferrari looked a lot better in practice 3, but ultimately I still don't trust them in qualifying. I still think they are clearly slower than McLaren and Mercedes. And I think once Williams hook up a lap, I still think Williams have got probably just a slight bit quicker car than them in qualifying, or at least in qualifying trim. So yeah, Ferrari I think will be around really the 3rd row of the grid. I think that's probably the best they'll do today. If they can somehow get in the top 2 rows of the grid, I think that would be a great result for them, because really Ferrari need at least a podium this weekend, I think, to continue the good form they've been in as of late, and to at least push in the right direction, because Ferrari are still developing this year's car, and they still hope later in the season to be in a position where they can, get some race wins. But, for them to keep up the good work or the good results as of late, yeah, they're going to need probably a 2nd row grid slot to be able to fight properly tomorrow for a podium. But, 3rd row is where I think they'll be at. Charles Leclerc should be the main man for Ferrari. Lewis Hamilton, who of course has been so great at this circuit, I wouldn't be fancying him too much this weekend, because he is still proven to be slower than Leclerc. Mercedes looking pretty good this weekend, a bit better than I expected, to be honest. George Russell, who took pole position here last year, is looking really good in that Mercedes car. And he, I think definitely, as long as he nails his lap, he's going to be probably not on pole position, but he's going to be close. He's going to be within probably a couple tenths at worst. And I think definitely top 3 material on the grid. Antonelli needs to try and be within, at worst, a couple tenths of a second if he wants to get a good enough grid position, because Antonelli has not been, I wouldn't say terrible this weekend, but he's not been that great in terms of his lap time difference between him and Russell. And if he is, say, 3 or 4 tenths off Russell in qualifying, that could see Antonelli be maybe even on the 4th row of the grid here, despite that Mercedes car being as quick as it is. Antonelli, we have to say, though, has never raced here before, so he is learning all the time. So we have to give him a slight break in regards to how he's performing this weekend. But If Antonelli can get at worst onto the third row of the grid, I think that would be at least good enough for him, given just how competitive the field is outside of the top three on the grid. But yeah, watch out for George Russell. If there is to be a team not named McLaren on pole, it's going to be Mercedes. For Aston Martin, Fernando Alonso, obviously the one they're relying on. He's the one keeping them in the fight, really. He's been very quick this weekend. We know he's always been so fast around this Montreal circuit. Was second here in 2023. And even last year, he, I think, qualified and finished in 6th place. So Alonso, this is one of his best tracks. Watch out for him. He definitely will be in the top 10, I think. Alpine, not quick enough, unfortunately. This is a bit too much of a power track for the Alpine team. Plus, we've seen around these street circuity type tracks this season, they've not been very good. Around proper race tracks, they've been a lot quicker. So, yeah, Alpine, I don't think have really got a chance of being in the top 10. And neither of Haas, who are definitely the slowest team on the grid. Racing Bulls will need to rely on one team or one driver really getting it wrong out of those, say, teams and drivers that should make Q3. Let's say one of the Ferraris gets knocked out for whatever reason. Then I think in that situation, Racing Bulls can take advantage. As to who is going to take advantage, sorry for muting my mic there, just had to cough. Yeah. As to who is going to take advantage of, say, Ferrari or Red Bull possibly getting it wrong, that's not a guaranteed thing, because Liam Lawson has been right there with Hadjar, I think, all weekend. So, yeah, very close between those two drivers, which is good to see. Racing Bulls, they need that. You know, Lawson and Hadjar to be as quick as each other, really, rather than Hadjar being quick and Lawson being miles off the pace, like we've seen for most of this season. But yeah, Racing Bulls, they look okay, but again, they just need a bit of help to get in the top 10 from another team or driver messing it up. Williams are the team to watch out for in this session. They are the dark horse for qualifying. There is no doubt about that. If both drivers can really nail their laps, I think they could cause a real surprise today. I think 4th is the absolute best they could get. 3rd, I think, is a bit too far out of reach. I think they would need a bit too much to go their way, which is unrealistic. 4th, though, I think is doable. Again, though, it's down to the two drivers delivering good enough laps. Alex Albon has been consistent this weekend. Carlos Sainz, though, not so much. He's the one to look out for, because if he nails it and gets it together, then I think Williams will be at worst on the 3rd row, if not on the 2nd row of the grid. So, yeah, watch out for Williams. They are going to be very interesting to see where they end up, and should be very strong, not just today, but I think tomorrow as well. And then finally, Sauber, keep an eye out for them as well. They've got a decent amount of pace in the car, and maybe will be close to the top 10 in qualifying. I can see them being decent in the race tomorrow as well. Obviously, Nico Hülkenberg in that car has been very good around this circuit before. He's had many points finishes here before in Montreal, so watch out for Hülkenberg. And Bortoletto has looked pretty quick this weekend, which is pretty good, given that Gabriel, the F2 champion from last year, has never raced here before. Yeah, watch out for Sauber. They look pretty decent. But here is my final prediction for qualifying. Lando Norris, I think, will, by a 10th of a second, take pole. George Russell, I think, will end up in 2nd. Oscar Piastri, 3rd. And then Max Verstappen, I'm going in 4th. With Carlos Sainz, 5th. Leclerc, 6th. Antonelli, 7th. Albon, 8th. Alonso, 9th. And Lewis Hamilton, I think, will end up in P10. So there you go. Those are my predictions for this qualifying session. With Ferrari, though, just to clarify with those predictions there, if that top 10 prediction does come true, I do think Ferrari will be a lot quicker tomorrow. So yeah, don't think that I think they're going to be 6th or 7th at best this weekend. I think that'll be around about at best what they'll do today. But tomorrow, I think they could get a podium because they have been, as there you go, we've got 14 more minutes to go until qualifying. Yeah, if you look at their race pace in the last 3 races, it's been really good and quite a bit better than what they've been able to do in qualifying compared to the rest of their rivals. So, yeah, I think if they are on the 3rd row of the grid, yeah, it won't be great, but I think they'll be a lot better tomorrow. So don't be too disappointed if you are a Ferrari fan, because I think there is podium level pace in that car for tomorrow, but not quite today. But yeah, we've got just over 10 minutes to go until qualifying is underway. So let me go through some final few comments before we get into this session. I can see we're on 41 likes, by the way. Let's try and get up to, say, 60 plus likes if we can in the next 20 minutes. That'd be great if we could do that as well. For everyone watching, make sure to vote in the poll running in the chat where I've asked you guys who will take pole position in Montreal. And your options are Piastri, Norris, Verstappen, and Russell. Very close, the poll, the live polling that I'm looking at. Very close it is. So if you want to turn it in another driver's way, and make sure to cast your vote. Rip Leclerc's sanity. Kirby says, I'm hoping for a better performance from Hamilton this weekend. I think we all are, but he's just not producing it. And obviously the last Grand Prix was not the qualifying, but the race was an absolute disaster from Hamilton. He was so slow. And it doesn't appear that he is getting any better. Rook says, saw someone say that all the teams have only 3 sets of mediums for quali and race, so if they're used in quali may limit options in the race. Yeah, well, again, tomorrow's race is going to be, I think, at least a 2-stop race, and the teams are going to want at least 2 sets of medium tyres for the Grand Prix. I don't think, though, anyone has used the hard tyre, which is the C4 compound. Probably because they're all saving it for the race, but obviously it's going to make things interesting when it comes to the race. Given that if people do use it, that what do you call it? No one will have experience of what the tire is even like. It should be fine. It won't be as bad as what that tire was like in Spain, where it was way too hard. It had absolutely no, speed or grip. But yeah, I think anyone in this session who uses a set of mediums, they'll only use one set of mediums. I don't think they're gonna. I don't think we saw it with Williams in Monaco, didn't we? Where I think Williams used like 2 new sets of mediums. I don't think we're gonna see that. That would be quite the surprise. In this session, really, you want to burn as many soft tires as you can so that you don't have any for tomorrow, because that C6 soft compound tire is just dreadful in terms of tire life. It's got no life to it whatsoever. So, yeah. ultimately, we'll see what happens. But I think we could get a couple drivers maybe using one set of their mediums in Q3 to maybe grab an extra couple tenths if they think they can. Crystal Racing says, can't wait for Alpine to get Merc engines, which of course, yep, is happening next year. Danny says Lewis doesn't have the pace anymore. And yeah, that's a simple reality. I know there are certain people out there who are just inhaling dangerous levels of copium, really. That Hamilton, he just needs to get used to the new car. That is absolute rubbish. He's had long enough as Hamilton, and he still isn't producing anywhere near his true, I wouldn't say capability, but what we know he can do. But what he can do in terms of what we're basing that off is a few years ago when he was in his prime, but he's not in his prime anymore. He's clearly past his prime. So yeah, Hamilton just isn't the same driver anymore. It's getting to the point with Lewis where he is getting closer and closer to the levels that Michael Schumacher was at in his last 3 years at Mercedes when Michael came back to Formula One. That is the level that Lewis is. I wouldn't say Lewis is at that level, but he's not far from it in terms of he's probably slightly better than the level that Michael was at in 2010, 11, or 12, but not by a lot. Dallin, I think it is. Sorry if I mispronounced your first name there. Says, my prediction is Lando on pole, and then Max, George, Oscar, Charles, Kimi, Alex, Lewis, Fernando, Carlos, Isaac, Yuki, Nico, Pierre, Lance, Liam, Ollie, Gabriel, Esti, as in Esteban Ocon, and then Franco in 20th. I think you're quite optimistic for Red Bull and Verstappen. But other than that, yeah, looks realistic. Danny says, as you get older, you lose speed as you're not as fast to react as you were when you were younger. You should have won a Ferrari years ago. I think he meant to say should have gone to Ferrari years ago. But yeah, I think there's people in America, and I think this is an American saying that Father Time is undefeated, and that's what's happening to Lewis Hamilton. He, old age. I won't say old age, but he's 40 years old now, and age is clearly caught up to him. He's not the driver that he used to be. And as Danny said, he just isn't. He hasn't got the physical reaction time that he used to have. That's ultimately what it comes down to when you get to the point where you're past your prime. It's not I don't think it's a mental thing. I think it's a physical thing, which makes Fernando Alonso look like an alien, really. Because Fernando, I wouldn't say Fernando at the moment is as good as he was, say, in like 2012, but he's not far from it, and he is still one of the top few drivers in the world. And he's 45, I think, is Fernando. He will be pretty soon. Right, let me try and find, I think, one more comment, and then we'll go on to the session as the F1 intro is just now playing. And let me just have a look. Yeah, Will F1 saying Hamilton to Ferrari, simple business move. And yeah, definitely has those benefits, no doubt about it. As Will says, Alonso will be 44 in July. Yeah, incredible what he's still doing at his age. Anyway, let's go on to a couple final bits of information and stats before we head into qualifying. Firstly, and importantly, the championship standings. Oscar Piastri, your championship leader, 10 points clear of Lando Norris coming into this weekend. Max Verstappen, 49 points behind, and that's why I say Max needs to be at worst in the top 3 for his championship. George Russell in 4th, Leclerc 5th, Hamilton in 6th, Antonelli only a few points ahead of Albon in 7th, and then Albon in 8th. Isaac Hadjar now up to 9th after the last Grand Prix. Esteban Ocon still in the top 10. And on the constructors' side, McLaren almost 200 points clear of the next team, being Ferrari now, who had a brilliant last couple races. Mercedes now down to 3rd, Red Bull in 4th. Williams are still comfortably 5th, but Racing Bulls are now 6th. 2 points clear of Haas. Sauber, who have been at the bottom of the championship for quite a while, are now 8th on 16 points, level with Aston Martin, but Sauber higher due to a better best race result of 5th. And then, Aston Martin in 9th. And Alpine, despite being pretty competitive in a lot of races this year, are last in the championship. Let's go on, though, to some key stats regarding the front-running teams for qualifying here in Montreal. For McLaren, their last pole in Canada was in 2010 with Lewis Hamilton. 15 years ago that weekend, they ended up getting the 1-2 in the race. And since the year 2000, obviously the turn of the century, they've only had pole 3 times here in Canada. All 3 of those poles were taken by, you guessed it, Lewis Hamilton. McLaren last year, 3rd and 4th they were on the grid. Can they turn that into a pole position today? For Red Bull, their last pole here was a couple years ago with Max Verstappen, who's been quite successful here as of late. And 2 pole positions in the last 10 years, being in 2022 and 2023. Last year, 2nd and 16th they were in qualifying. Can they somehow get on the front row again? Ferrari's last pole in Canada was 6 years ago with Sebastian Vettel in 2019. They've taken 2 poles in Canada since then. Also 2018, they took pole with Vettel. Last year, though, 11th and 12th they were in qualifying. It was their worst Grand Prix of the year. Surely they could do better than that today. And for Mercedes, their last pole in Canada was actually last year with George Russell, but I messed it up. For some reason, I put that it was in 2017. That is not true. And they have actually taken 4 pole positions in the last 10 years in Canada. So, sorry for messing that up. And last year, 1st and 7th, they were in qualifying. Can they take pole for the 2nd year in a row in Montreal? Let's find out. And Q1 will be underway in a minute or so. And I will sync up the timer at the 17-minute mark. As of course, it is a 18-minute long session. And as you can see, whoever's in the bottom 5 below the dotted line on the left-hand side at the end of Q1 will be out of the session. But Q1 will be underway in a moment. As we're looking at the end of the pit lane. And the 2 Williamses, who have been very strong this weekend, are queuing up. And there you go, green light on. Qualifying is underway in Montreal. And thankfully, we've got a good packed house in a beautiful, or on a beautiful day here in Montreal. This has been, I think, the first time we've had sunshine for qualifying here in Montreal since 2019. The last 3 years have been cold, wet, damp, windy, pretty much like the UK. Yeah, all the cars just slowly filtering onto track. There is a comment in the chat I want to read out in a moment. But let me just make sure I get the timer synced up on screen. As looks like everyone is coming out on a set of soft tyres, so I don't think we're going to get anyone trying it in this session. I think the first time we'll get people actually trying to get through on the medium will probably be towards the end of Q2. As there you go. Let me just adjust the position. And yeah, 17 minutes to go in Q1. Just wanted to read out this comment from Corey, who says, "Bro, I've been listening to you and the rubbish you're speaking in Hamilton. Ferrari isn't giving Hamilton a car to compete with. You sound ridiculous trying to blame Hamilton's age and not the car." Yes, the Ferrari car is not good. It's not good enough. It's not the best car. But even if it was, his performance level is still not good enough. This season, if you look at the lap time difference and how regularly he's been beaten by Leclerc, who we'd all agree, Hamilton and Leclerc, if you were to compare those two at their absolute best, Lewis Hamilton is the better driver. But Hamilton right now is not at his best. That's why we are criticizing Lewis Hamilton, because he's not been, anywhere near good enough. Yes, the car could be a lot better, absolutely. But when I say that he is not performing well enough, it is in regards to his teammate. If Hamilton was beating Leclerc most races, I wouldn't be criticizing him, because at the end of the day, with how great Leclerc is, if he was beating Leclerc every race, not saying he needs to, but if he was, performing at the absolute best level he could, then, and was still finishing where he was, then yeah, blame the car all you want for him being where he is. But at the end of the day, compared to his teammate, Leclerc, he has not been anywhere near good enough when you consider just how great we know he can be. So, I'm not hating on him at all. I'm giving him absolutely fair criticism. Corey responding, if you have a car that isn't responding and your engineers are not setting up the car right or twerking it in the wrong direction, is on the driver. Who would be at their best with that car? Come on now. Well, Leclerc is still performing at his best with that car, so let's not. I think you're almost pretending like this Ferrari car is like the 2014 Ferrari car, where it's understeering and oversteering at the same time, and it's just basically a boat. It's not as bad as some people are making out. Is it good enough? Again, no, it's not. But Lewis's performance is not because the engineers are not setting it up right. The issues with the car, both drivers have been suffering with, and Lewis simply has performed a lot worse than Leclerc. This isn't, this is exactly the same argument Hamilton fans were making last year with his disappointing performance last year, that, the car wasn't right, or the setup, or... No. The Mercedes car last year was not good, but at the end of the day, your first job is to beat your teammate. And Lewis Hamilton, with how great he is, should be able to beat any teammate he has. As George Russell, by the way, has just gone quickest. And Antonelli is in second place. But yeah, Hamilton's, again, lack of performance is not down to sabotage by the engineers. I remember, was it last year, someone sent Mercedes an email claiming that they were sabotaging him, which was absolute bullshit. Yeah. It's simply Lewis Hamilton is not doing a good enough job. No car is perfect. Everyone, look at look what's going on with Max Verstappen, for example. His car has lots of issues, yet he is still able to get around that and still produce at a very high level and still produce basically his absolute best, despite the car not being good, really, at all. But Lewis Hamilton it is simply not doing that. So, yeah. As we've got 3 drivers out there on the mediums, but I don't think these drivers are going to complete the session on the medium tyres, put it that way. As Lando Norris comes to the line and goes third with a purple final sector, as Lewis Hamilton is now coming to the line, and Hamilton only goes 16th. As here comes Oscar Piastri, who's done a purple middle sector. Has he done a good enough final sector? Yes, he has. He's gone quickest by a quarter of a second onto a 1:12.3. I will in a moment get on to what do you call it? I will get on to what the what lap times we should be seeing for pole position and should be seeing in this session. But a bit preoccupied at the moment. As, Lance Stroll, which has popped up to second, Russell third, Antonelli fourth, Norris fifth. And for some reason, they've hidden the running order. I have no idea why they've done that. But Piastri is currently quickest. Yeah, one final thing I will say in regards to Lewis Hamilton is, the car has handling issues. If you look at the grid, almost every car has handling issues. At the end of the day, your job as a driver is to, 1, beat your teammate and to get the best out of the car. Lewis Hamilton is failing on both fronts. Therefore, criticism is what he will get. Especially when we know he can beat his teammate and he can get the best out of that car, as Leclerc does right there by going second. So again, that is purely why, or what I use to criticize drivers is, 1, how are you doing compared to your teammate, and secondly, are you getting the best out of that car? That's why I don't criticize Max Verstappen, because he thrashes his teammates and he gets the best out of the car basically every session. Anyway, moving on. So Piastri's quickest by 1/10.5 from Leclerc, and then Stroll third, Alonso fourth. Alonso only about 0.2 off on medium tyres, so it shows you just how great those mediums are in lasting over the lap. And then you got Russell, Antonelli, Norris, Colapinto, Bortoletto, and Sainz completing the top 10. Colapinto, out of nowhere, is in the top 10. And then Gasly is 11th, Albon 12th, Lawson 13th, Hadjar 14th, Hulkenberg is 15th, as Hadjar has just popped into the top 10. Lewis Hamilton now goes second ahead of his teammate. A lot more like it from him, as Max Verstappen goes quickest by 0.5 So, let me just update that. So, Verstappen quickest, but these lap times are, I wouldn't say slow, but they could be a bit quicker. The best time you're going to see in Q1 here is going to be either a low 1 minute 12 or at best a late 1 minute 11. So point is, if you can do a 1 minute 12.2 or quicker, then, or a 1 minute 12.3 or quicker, then you should make it through to Q2, as Fernando Alonso goes quickest on the medium tyre. So Alonso, Verstappen, Piastri, Hamilton obviously is now up to 4th. Let me just update that. And then Russell is now 5th, Leclerc 6th, and then Stroll, Antonelli, Hadjar now in the top 10. And then Norris 10th, and then Colapinto, Bortoletto, Sainz was in 13th, but now Liam Lawson is up to P10, as Sonoda goes 9th for Red Bull. That is a lot more like it from Yuki. That's a good lap from the Japanese driver. And then, yeah, Lawson 11th, and then Norris, Colapinto, Bortoletto, Sainz. And then in the drop zone, Gasly, Albon, surprisingly, and then Hulkenberg, Ocon, and Behrman. The two Haas's, I'm sure, will not make it through here because they are slow. But Albon surely can do better than 17th, and surely Carlos Sainz can do better than 15th. Williams not showing any pace so far, as Albon powers down the back straight and goes slightly too deep and misses the chicane, and he has blown that lap. As, oh, what's this? He's holding... Is he holding a bit of a debris, or something is hanging off the Williams on the engine cover? And yeah, it's... oh, the engine cover's come off on one side of the car. Oh, that's a big... It literally exploded off the car and it's come off down the back straight. That might be a red flag for the debris. We've seen that before. It happened, I think, Max Verstappen had it once at Monza in when he was at Toro Rosso. But yeah, he's going to have to come back in to the pits and get a new engine cover put on. But there isn't a lot of time left. As yet, red flag with 5 minutes and 30 seconds to go. And it is for that debris. And, of course, Albon still has a bit of his engine cover hanging off that could easily fly off and hit someone. So, yeah, sensible decision. This should only take a few minutes to clear up. As somebody improved during all of that, and it was Esteban Ocon who went up to 14th out of nowhere. But yeah, red flag with 5.5 minutes to go, and in the drop zone, Sainz, Gasly, Albon, Hulkenberg, and Behrman, both Williamses in the drop zone. As Albon now comes in. And I'm not sure if he will get back out again. Will Albon? We'll have to see. Danny saying in the chat, stop blaming the Ferrari car. It's the same as people blaming the car. Russell was the better driver last year with Mercedes. Exactly. Like, you know, at the end of the day, like I said, most cars on the grid have handling issues, but your job is to beat your teammate and to get the best out of the car, and not everyone is able to do it. So, you know, I'm not going to criticize everyone on the grid for not meeting those two parameters that I've set. Because, again, not everyone can get the absolute best out of their cars. For example, you look at the midfield, Yeah, you've got some good midfield drivers in there like Gasly, Hadjar, Hulkenberg, Sainz and Albon, drivers like that. But they're not going to be able to get the absolute best out of those cars because they are not elite level Formula One drivers. They are not Max Verstappen or Charles Leclerc or George Russell. They're not on that level. And that's not really what they've been employed for. They've been employed to just be consistent, really, and deliver consistently, not necessarily get the absolute maximum from the car, because that's never going to be possible in the midfield, because you're never going to be able to hire a Max Verstappen if you're a midfield team. So it's more about consistency. Obviously, yeah, you'll try and hire the best drivers you possibly can to get the most out of it that you can, given the driver pool that you are looking at in terms of who you hire as for drivers. But I'm not gonna, Nico Hulkenberg, I think, does the best he can, for example, for Sauber. Could he, could others on the grid get more out of that Sauber? Yeah, they could. Again, Max Verstappen, if you put him in the Sauber, probably would be, I don't know, 0.3, maybe 0.4 of a second better per lap. But because it's not possible for Sauber to have that type of driver in their car, the best they can do is what they've got. So yeah, Hulkenberg, I think, does a good enough job. But when we look at Lewis Hamilton, we know he's got the capability to beat anyone as a teammate. Look at all the teammates he's had. He's had loads of amazing teammates. Alonso, Button, Rosberg, Russell, and he's beaten all those drivers at least over one season. What do you call it? So yeah, we know he can do better. Plus, he's regularly being beaten by his teammate. So yeah, that's where the criticism comes in. Simple as. But I do kind of feel for certain Lewis Hamilton fans, because I think a lot of the Hamilton fans have just not accepted the reality that Lewis is past it. He's washed. And, there's nothing wrong in accepting that. I mean, I'm pretty sure Michael Schumacher fans, when Michael came back in 2010, I'm pretty sure they knew and accepted that he was washed compared to what obviously he was before, but still obviously supported him and enjoyed what they could from him. So it's just a matter of accepting reality for that fan base, I think, and hopefully they will eventually accept reality, because the reality is that Lewis Hamilton is washed. As the session is about to get underway. And we are just waiting for the green light to come on. It should be any moment now. And yeah, in about once the session does get underway, I will 30 seconds later sync up the timer at the 5-minute mark. And yep, still waiting. As we're just looking at the, I think it's the two McLarens. Yep, at the end of the pit lane. There you go. The green lights come on and we are back underway. Remember, in the drop zone, we have Sainz, Gasly, Albon, Behrman, and Hulkenberg. Can Williams get themselves out of the drop zone? They absolutely have to, because they've got a pretty quick car, but they cannot obviously utilize that if they are low down on the grid. As there you go, 5 minutes left in Q1. But currently, Fernando Alonso on a set of mediums is fastest with a 1:12.2. The issue there, though, with Aston Martin, I don't know how many sets of mediums they've got left, but they don't want to be using too many in this session. And, you know, they need to keep their powder dry to an extent, because it's all good being super quick on that compound today, but if they don't have enough of that tomorrow, they will suffer. So they need to not go too over the top with that compound. As here comes Lando Norris, who has been pretty clearly the quicker McLaren driver this weekend, but currently he's down in 12th. Starts what will probably be his final lap of Q1. As long as Lando improves by about half a second, then he should be fine to get into Q2. And yeah, he's done a very, very good first sector. If he keeps this up, he may get close or even dip into the 1:11. Of course, the best lap time we've seen so far this weekend is a 1:11.7, which Lando did in practice 3. Pole position today, by the way, should be a low 1:11, possibly a late 1:10. It's going to be anywhere between a 1:10.9 and a 1:11.2, I think, pole position later. So that's the lap time to keep your eyes on. As Lando, purple middle sector, as Piastri does a 1:11.9. He's definitely through with that. And here comes Norris, who goes a 10th of a second quicker, and McLaren are through to Q2, as Albon has rejoined the circuit with 2.5 minutes to go. As Charles Leclerc goes third, that should be good enough for him. And Lewis Hamilton now goes third by a quarter of a second, only slightly behind Piastri with that lap, as Gasly goes 12th. Not sure that's going to be enough for Gasly, but we'll see. As Alonso's still out there. Oh no, this is Stroll on the medium tyre. As Alonso on the medium has gone up to 4th place. Splitting the Ferraris is Fernando. Colapinto, what an improvement by him. He goes 6th. Ahead of his teammate Gasly. That is quite incredible, given that Colapinto has been quite slow since his comeback to Formula 1. So, Bortoleto, Sainz, Albon, Behrman, and Hulkenberg, your drop zone now. Here is Lawson, is it? Nope, it's Hajar, who's on a decent lap. Has a decent hairpin. The cars get out of the way for him, thankfully. And now, DRS Open powers down the back straight, where a lot of overtaking will be done tomorrow. Gets through the chicane just fine. Gets as close as he can to the Wall of Champions without kissing it. And Isaac Hajar goes 5th, and that is him through to Q2. Here is Sonoda, who goes 9th. That probably might be enough. That's not a guarantee, though, as Russell goes 5th. We're looking on board now. Oliver Behrman, as Hulkenberg is doing some good sectors. Antonelli only goes 10th. not great from Antonelli, I must say. As Behrman, understeers through the first part of the chicane. That Haas is handling dreadfully. And he comes to the line and he does go up to 11th place, but I'm not sure he's going to stay there. As Hulkenberg goes up to 12th place, somehow goes slower than Behrman. Ocon, 14th. Imagine if Behrman didn't make that mistake, he probably would have been comfortably in the top 10. Here's Albon, who's currently last. Somehow, can Williams get through? Albon goes up to 6th. Here comes Carlos Sainz, who is only 16th. What an awful lap by Sainz. And he is out in Q1. As Bortoleto improves, but only goes 16th himself. As Lance Stroll, I think he's out also in 18th place. As we're looking at Max Verstappen on a final lap, currently P10. And Verstappen goes P5. So there you go. Q1 over and done with. And wow, what a surprising Q1 that was. But let's go through your drivers that have made it through, as Hadjar and Sainz incident noted for impeding. That might be why Carlos Sainz did not make it through. And let's see. On board. And yeah, Isaac Hadjar is going to get a penalty, as he was on the racing line into, I think, turn 7. As Hadjar said, he thought Sainz had aborted. Well, his engineer should have told him he had not, because that is a pretty clear slam dunk penalty for Hadjar, which is a shame, and that has cost Carlos Sainz dearly, who is out in 17th. Anyway, into Q2 are the two McLarens of Norris and Piastri, Hamilton, Alonso, Verstappen, Russell, Albon, Hadjar, Leclerc, Colapinto out-qualifying Gasly. Finally, Colapinto delivering. Antonelli 11th, Behrman 12th, Hulkenberg 13th, Tsunoda 14th, Ocon 15th. Somehow, both Haases make it through to Q2, despite having such a poor car this weekend. But knocked out in Q1 rather, Gabriel Bortoleto, Carlos Sainz, Lance Stroll, Liam Lawson, and Pierre Gasly. And yeah, surprising to see Gasly and Sainz out in Q1. As Q2 should be underway in a couple minutes' time. But yeah, that is very surprising. And also, Lawson, Stroll, and Bortoleto being knocked out is quite surprising as well, given that those cars, again, are quite a bit quicker than where they've placed. So already, surprise eliminations here in Q1. Let's hope that continues for the rest of the session. But there you go. There's the second cutoff zone. And anyone who, of course, who is in between those two dotted lines at the end of Q2 will be out in those positions. But before I cover Q2, let me quickly just clear my throat, have a drink, and then I'll be back with you guys in a couple moments' time. So yeah, my throat should be in a bit better condition. Brooks saying in the chat, the whole grid from P1 to P20 separated by 0.8 of a second. Incredible how close it is becoming Formula One in these last few months or so compared to how it was a couple years ago. As Q2 will start in 3 minutes' time. But yeah, it is always incredibly close around these shorter racetracks, but with how stable the regulations have been, it's just obviously got closer and closer. As Carlos Sainz being told on the radio that he is qualified 17th, and his response was, "What the fuck?" As Lance Stroll walks to the FIA way bridge and doesn't look really bothered at all that he's qualified 18th, but that's really the criticism, isn't it, with Lance Stroll? But for Williams, at least they've got one car still in play. So there is still a good result to be had, but yeah, that is not the start to qualifying that they needed. Not at all. But yeah, we'll see in this session just what goes down. Antonelli wasn't very quick in this in Q1, so he might be at a bit of a risk in Q2. But Tsunoda, you would imagine, will probably get eliminated in Q2 because, again, the Red Bull just isn't quick enough, I'm afraid, with, him in it. Other drivers, though, that should be eliminated in this session, you'd think the two Haases, Behrman and Ocon, Hulkenberg as well, and Tsunoda. So, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up, Behrman 15th, Ocon 15th, Behrman 14th, and then Hulkenberg 13th, and then Tsunoda, say, 12th, and then 11th, probably, well, actually, yeah, Colapinto. So, yeah, Colapinto, Tsunoda, Hulkenberg, Behrman, and Ocon. You'd think those would be the 5 to be eliminated in this session, but it is not as simple as that. One thing we do know, though, is that Isaac Hadjar is definitely going to get a penalty for that bit of impeding he did. So if he does make the top 10, he has to make the most of his Q3 lap, because he will definitely it'll be a 3-place drop, I would imagine. So Hadjar will probably start the race 12th or 13th. If he makes it into the top 10, of course. As Q2 underway, and we've got Verstappen and the two McLarens already on the track. And the quickest time in this session should be a mid 1 minute 11. So anywhere between a 1:11.4 and a 1:11.6. But I think to get through to Q2, you're going to have to do, well, to guarantee yourself a place in Q2, in Q3, sorry, you're going to have to do a 1 minute 11 point whatever lap time. So anyone who does a 1 minute 11 lap time should make Q3. As Max Verstappen here on a set of mediums to start Q2. Let's see what lap time Verstappen can do. He did what was it? I think 1:12.1 in Q1. So he'll be hoping to dip straight into the 1 minute 11s. He does a very, very good first sector. So this is going to be a strong lap time on this compound. As he comes up to turn 8. Absolutely love that chicane, turn 8 and 9. And then the run up to the hairpin. And yeah, this is a good lap from Verstappen, but I'm not sure if this is an amazing one. He is actually a couple tenths of a second up on Norris, who's out there doing a lap time on the soft compound tyre. So this is working well for the moment, as Max has a slight fight with the car through the final corner, but does a 1:11.6. That is a fantastic lap time on that compound, as Lando Norris goes second, only about 0.04 of a second slower. As Piastri, he now comes to the lines to the purple middle sector. What can he do? He goes third, but it's about 0.75 of a tenth off the pace. So Max and the two McLarens separated by 0.077 of a second. But that is an impressive lap time by Max Verstappen on that compound. And that puts him possibly in the conversation for pole position, as Behrman goes up to fourth, just had a Colapinto. As we're looking at the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc. What can he do? He's on the soft, and Leclerc only does a 1 minute point or 11.9, which is not bad, but it's not great either. As Lewis Hamilton goes slightly slower. So yeah, Ferrari fourth and fifth, and 0.3 off the pace of Verstappen. That will be a bit of a concern for them. Be that far off. But Ferrari do tend to use scrubbed tyres at the start of Q2. So if maybe they are doing that. And if they are, then actually that's not a bad start to Q2. We'll have to see. As we're looking at Fernando Alonso, who did a warm-up lap. Here is his proper lap on the soft tyre. As he finishes the final chicane, comes to the line, and Alonso goes about 1/10 of a second behind Hamilton in 6th place. Alonso looking very quick today. And I think with that lap time, Alonso probably has already done just about enough to make his way into Q3. May, need an extra 10th or so of an improvement just to make sure, but yeah, looks good. As here is Yuki Tsunoda, who I think so far is having a good qualifying. 0.3 off, though, his teammate in the first sector. Really needs to not lose any more lap time through the lap if he can. But as I said, if you can do a 1 minute 11 point whatever, then you should be able to get through to Q3. And Tsunoda is not quite doing that, I think, at the moment with the lap time that he's probably going to do. It's going to be probably a low 1 minute 12 at best, which is not terrible, but it doesn't assure him of a place in the top 10, as Nico Hülkenberg is up to 10th place. Here comes Tsunoda, who goes 7th. That was a good final part of the lap, 1:12.3. But yeah, he will need to improve a bit on that lap time if he wants to make it through. So Tsunoda 7th, Behrman 8th. Here's Hadjar, who goes 10th. So Behrman 8th, Colapinto 9th, Hadjar 10th. And then Ocon 11th, Hülkenberg 12th, Albon 13th. Now all we're waiting for is the two Mercedes drivers to set a lap time, and George Russell is on a lap, but it's not very quick. Not very quick at all, I must say. Russell on course to end up between Alonso and Tsunoda. But if he has a really good final sector, might be able to get ahead of Alonso. Let's see. George Russell to the line. Does a 1 minute 11.9, which I think is actually slightly slower than he went in practice 3. So Mercedes have definitely got more pace in the bag. And Antonelli goes 8th, about a 10th and a half behind. So yeah, Mercedes, I think there is more pace there. But I'm not sure if it's a lot more to the point where they could fight for pole. As we're looking at Colapinto on board here as he oversteered at the final corner. Colapinto currently 11th. If he would qualify there, I don't think anyone could complain whatsoever. And credit to Colapinto, out-qualifying Gasly. And yeah, if he can do that once every, 3 races and keep close enough to Gasly on lap time, then that's good enough, really. That's all we ask for, I think, from him. As now we're looking at Alex Albon, who's gone out on a set of medium compound tyres. Williams having a lot more of a struggle today than I expected, as Lewis Hamilton has improved his lap time and he's gone ahead of Leclerc by not much, I think 0.03 of a second. So Hamilton only improving by, I think, 10th and a half. Here is Charles Leclerc, though, who starts a new lap, presumably on fresh tyres. If that first set of tyres was used, then really Leclerc needs to be going or getting in there really with Max and the 2 McLarens, but he's not at the moment on lap time. He's 2 tenths down on Max after the first sector. That first sector that Max did was incredibly quick, because everyone's struggling to match it. Leclerc doing a lot better in the middle sector, purple middle sector. So yeah, this is a lot more like it. Ferrari starting to show what they truly have. And if he has a good enough final sector here, Leclerc, he may go quickest. Can he show his hand and show that Ferrari can maybe take pole today? He comes to the line. Leclerc does go quickest. A 1:11.626. Puts Ferrari in the conversation, but I still think McLaren and, well, Max in the Red Bull, I still think they've got more pace to show, and Mercedes, I think, have as well. So if you're a Ferrari fan, calm down, because that lap time I don't think is quite as good as it seems, as Albon understeering slightly through the first part of the chicane. He's on the medium tyre. What's this lap time? It's a good one. It's a very good one. A 1:11.9. That puts him 7th. And I think that might just get him through to Q3. If he has any more pace in that tyre left to go for another lap, then great. But I think that lap he's just done, Albon, that might just be enough to get himself through. As we've got a few cars coming back out. Tsunoda, the 2 Mercedes, the 2 McLarens. Max is already out on the track on an outlap. We're looking at Franco Colapinto on the mediums, who is having a bit of a struggle through turn 2. As Tsunoda is being overtaken there, coming out of the pit lane. Tsunoda just being very cautious. As Colapinto slightly up on Tsunoda, who of course is in P10. If Colapinto wants to get through, he's probably going to have to go a couple tenths of a second quicker, at least, than what Tsunoda has done. And at the moment, he's doing that. He's a couple tenths up after the first 2 sectors. If you get the really good final sector, this might be Franco Colapinto making Q3 for the first time, I think, since Baku last year. And proving the doubters wrong is Franco. As all had a bit of a moment through the chicane, but I think he got away with it. And comes to the line. And he goes 10th, but I think he did lose some lap time at that final chicane. I think he may have clipped the wall. But he goes 10th, but I'm not sure that's going to be enough for Colapinto. I think he just gave away probably a 10th too much through that final chicane. And yeah, that should be the 112.1 he's just done. That should be beatable for Tsunoda, Hadjar, Albon. Well, Albon's already in the top 10, but you know what I mean. Should be beatable, that lap time. As we're looking at Alonso, who is clearly not on a push lap. As we've got a few of the top drivers on push laps. And here is Yuki Tsunoda coming into turn 8 and 9. Car looking very dynamic on the entry. He gets through it as Antonelli is out there on a set of mediums for this final Q2 lap. Tsunoda half a tenth down on Colapinto after the first two sectors. Not a good enough lap so far. Can he save it in the final sector as Russell goes quickest on a 1:11.5 on mediums? That is a statement lap from George Russell. As Tsunoda through the final chicane. Can he make it to Q3? For now, he can. I'm not sure that's going to be enough, though. We'll see. As Antonelli through the final chicane on the mediums. Surely he will improve and make it through. He goes 8th. That probably, yes, will be enough for Antonelli, but not a great final lap. Lando Norris goes 2nd on the soft tyres. As Hadjar has some traffic there, but they get out of the way. Hadjar almost a 10th off Tsunoda after the first two sectors. Going to need a mighty final sector to get into the top 10, especially with this penalty looming. And here comes a young Frenchman into the final chicane. And not sure if this is going to be good enough. He comes to the line. He does get into 9th place. I think that might just be enough from Hadjar as Alonso improves up to 6th. Can Hulkenberg somehow make it into the top 10 in the Sauber? Finished 5th in the last Grand Prix. Where can he go now? 13th. And that is all she wrote in regards to Q2. And yes, Isaac Hadjar did make it through yet again, making Q3. What a record he's got this season of making the second part of, or the third part of qualifying. As Tsunoda saying, yeah, Russell, that's a penalty, man. And yeah, Russell overtook Tsunoda on the exit of the pit lane, but I'm not sure if that was quite allowed, what he did. We'll have to see. As all Leclerc getting in the way of a Red Bull there. And it was... Okay, he didn't get in the way of a Red Bull there. Tsunoda slowed down to let his teammate through, just like Leclerc did into turn 7. Or into turn 6. And then for some reason, Tsunoda decided to overtake Leclerc immediately. No idea why. But Q2 is over, guys. Let's go through the drivers that have made it through to the top 10 shootout on the streets of Montreal. George Russell, Lando Norris, Charles Leclerc, Max Verstappen, Oscar Piastri, Fernando Alonso, Lewis Hamilton, Alex Albon, Kimi Antonelli, and yet again this season, Isaac Hadjar. But knocked out in Q2, guys, Yuki Tsunoda for Red Bull, Franco Colapinto for Alpine, Nico Hulkenberg for Sauber, Oliver Behrman and Esteban Ocon for the Haas team. And Q3 will be underway, hopefully, in the next, 3-4 minutes' time. But I have to say, again, great job by Hadjar. Great job also by Albon on the mediums to get through there. Obviously, Alonso, fantastic from him. Great lap from Russell that was. I hope he doesn't get a penalty because I think that was a really good lap there. And I think he might be able to get in the fight here for pole. But in regards to the eliminated drivers in Q2, Colapinto, I will say, great effort today. Again, out qualifying Gasly and qualifying 12th in a car that probably at best shouldn't even be in 12th, probably 13th, 14th is, a great effort from him. So, yeah, good to see that Franco is starting to get with it in 2025. But the shootout of Q3, of course, will be 12 minutes long. I'll sync up the timer at the 11-minute mark. Sonoda has a 10-place penalty, I'm hearing, for a red flag infringement in practice 3. I didn't know that. Thanks for letting me know, guys. But, still not a good enough effort from Sonoda. He definitely could have, he definitely could have made Q3 there. But he just didn't do quite a good enough lap. But before we go any further, I want to see who is going to win this poll. Piastri and Norris in the poll are locked on 30% after nearly 1,200 votes. You guys have 2 more minutes to decide who wins that poll of who takes pole here in Montreal. Incredibly close, the vote, between not just Piastri and Norris, but Verstappen as well. So yeah, I'll wait a couple minutes and we'll see who you guys decide to vote for. In terms of poll, I still am going to back McLaren, but Ferrari and Red Bull definitely closer than I expected. So ultimately, we will see who ends up where. But this is going to be a very exciting Q3. As Rook says, Colapinto under investigation for a Delta infringement for Q2. Oh, and he'll be investigated after the session. Right. As the crowd looking pretty boisterous and very much looking forward to what should be a cracking conclusion to qualifying. And this, of course, is very important for the championship. Max Verstappen, as I said earlier, needs at worst 3rd here if he can get it. For the McLarens, though, as long as both McLarens can end up in the top 3, I think they'll be satisfied enough with that, knowing that in the race, McLaren are probably going to dominate proceedings, given just how quick their car is, especially over a race distance. But if you get it wrong in this session, it could absolutely have a big effect on the World Championship. So this is a big 12 minutes of qualifying coming up. As we see Lewis Hamilton parked up at the exit of the pit lane. There is Max Verstappen still in his garage. And I'm going to finish up the poll in the chat. It clearly, it could not be separated in the end. But thank you guys for the 1.1k votes on the poll, where I've asked who will take pole position here in Montreal, and locked on 30%. Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri. You guys just could not decide between the two McLaren drivers who was going to get pole. Only 1% behind on 29%, Max Verstappen. Yeah, very close poll. The closest poll I think we've ever had. And then on 10%, George Russell. Let's hope it is that close here in Q3. As we look at Fernando Alonso, who puts his visor down. Q3 now begins. Alonso, remember, has had pole position here before, 2006. He took pole and won the Canadian Grand Prix, which was, I think, the only time he's won the Canadian Grand Prix. Yeah, it is. But remember, of course, Alonso was on the front row here. Not last year, but the year before. So Alonso knows what it's like to be super quick in Montreal. As Max Verstappen we're looking at still in the garage. So a slightly different run plan as they're about to release him. Slightly different run plan there for Red Bull, of going a slight bit later than the others, as McLaren already out there. McLaren halfway or just over halfway through their out laps. Ferrari, though, are nearly done with their out laps, as Charles Leclerc comes through the final chicane and begins his first attempt at maybe, who knows, pole position. Again, pole position, the lap time should be anywhere between a 1 minute 10.9 and a 1:11.2. If anyone could do a lap time in between there, you're either going to be on pole or very, very close to it, as Leclerc bouncing around in the first sector. First sector, though, is not good enough. It's a 20.0. Max did a 19.8 in the first sector in Q2. So, Lewis Hamilton has clearly had an issue because he's already backed off. As Leclerc, he's coming up to the middle sector point now. Not a bad lap from Leclerc, but it definitely is not pole position pace. That is for sure. As he now rockets down the back straight where Ferrari will be at their strongest. As Leclerc slides a bit on the entry and the exit of the final chicane. As Lando Norris done a purple middle sector, and Leclerc goes quickest on a 1:11.7, which is literally slower than he went in Q2. So definitely more pace in that car, as Norris has bottled it at the final chicane. Went slightly too deep, and he has aborted the lap. What's Oscar Piastri doing? He has not aborted his lap. He has gone through the final chicane just fine. He's done a purple middle sector. Here comes Piastri. A 1:11.2. That is an absolute stunner of a lap time. But Max Verstappen is nearly 0.2 up after the first two sectors. Is Max going to produce what is going to be one of the best possible pole laps of the year? As here he comes through the final chicane. Car sliding beautifully to the line. The world champion comes, and he is by 1/4 tenth on provisional pole. What a lap by Verstappen, who yet again, just when you think it's not possible, he shows you that somehow he is able still to grab first place as Lando told on the radio to remember something about the braking. I think his engineer there just trying to calm him down after obviously making such a big mistake. As now we're looking at George Russell, already 3/10 down after the first sector. Max is incredible in Sector 1. That's where Verstappen is really showing his quality. And this is a clear example of Max Verstappen showing why he is the world champion. As Russell pretty much level with Verstappen through the middle sector, but overall for the lap, still 3/10 down. As Max says on the radio, my steering wheel got heavy again starting the lap. So maybe something to fix there for Red Bull. But here comes Russell. Russell probably will go third with this lap, but going to be a bit behind Verstappen. Here he comes to the line. It's a good final sector, but yeah, Russell is third, a quarter of a second off pole. Here is Antonelli, who goes less than a tenth behind his teammate. Good lap there from Antonelli, and goes fourth ahead of Leclerc. Here's Lando Norris. Still 6.5 minutes to go, but he's going again. And into the final chicane. It's not the best run, but it's a lot better than last time. To the line he comes. Only fifth for Norris, but yeah, that's on a used, or not a used, but an extra couple laps done on that compact. Because obviously of the mistake that he made. So Lando will have to come back in and get a new set of tyres on. But yeah, this is right here. This is where Lando has been messing up really in 2025, is the final laps in qualifying, cracking under that pressure. And so far he has done it yet again. But there is still one more lap to come where he can get the job done. Here's Alex Albon on the medium tyre, only goes 9th. So, as Alonso actually ahead of Lewis Hamilton by 0.03 of a second. Alonso only a tenth behind Leclerc. Alonso doing an absolutely amazing job in the Aston Martin. So, 5 minutes to go in qualifying. Max Verstappen is on provisional pole by a quarter of a tenth from Piastri, the championship leader. Russell third, Antonelli fourth, Norris fifth, Leclerc sixth, Alonso seventh, Hamilton eighth, Albon ninth, Hadjar 10th. If Max could get pole here, this could transform his season. Remember, he's 49 points behind after the disaster of the last Grand Prix. And a pole here could really get his championship bid going for 2025. As Lando Norris, or no, this is Oscar Piastri now being wheeled back into the garage at pretty much the same time as his teammate. As Alonso and Hamilton already back out there on outlaps, interestingly. So maybe those two are going to be doing a warm-up lap first before they do their final proper lap. As Charles Leclerc was saying about to be released from the Ferrari pits. Leclerc can definitely do better. I think Leclerc could get on the second row if he really gets his final lap right, which would put him in a good position for tomorrow to get a third podium in a row in 2025. As here is Lewis Hamilton, who has had so many poles here before, but pole is not possible for him this time around for the reasons we've already discussed. First sector, though, is good compared to what he's done before. Now into the middle sector. As Alonso on another set of mediums, absolutely burning through those tyres. Again, hopefully they've got The mediums left tomorrow, as Hamilton has not improved on his middle sector, but he's still quarter of a second down on Verstappen. He might be able to pop this on the second row of the grid, Lewis Hamilton. All depends on the final sector. As here comes Alonso to the line, who goes fourth on the medium. That is a stunning time. Only 3/10 off pole as Lewis Hamilton now goes fourth. But, of course, all the others are yet to do their final lap, so those two will probably fall down the order. But we'll see ultimately where they end up. Alonso, though, what a session he has had. You cannot blame him at all and say that he hasn't done the best he can. He absolutely has. Here is Leclerc on his final lap. Leclerc has never had pole position here. The best result he's ever had here was third in 2019. As Lando being told yet again on the radio, don't over push the brake, as Leclerc does a purple first sector, but he loses the rear end, and he loses it again, and he's lost the lap. But there is still time for him to do another lap, but he did such a good first sector, Leclerc, and then the rear end of the Ferrari said nope, and he nearly went round. Piastri does a decent first sector. Lando does a much better first sector, a 10th quicker than Oscar. As Piastri looking good through the chicane there. Max half a 10th up on the first sector. He has done good start for the world champion. Piastri, though, has not improved his middle sector. What's Lando done? Lando half a second off Verstappen. Lando is not going to get pole here, but he's got to salvage his lap in the final sector because he's currently in 7th. Here comes Piastri through the final chicane. To the line. Can Oscar grab pole? Yes, he can for the moment by a 10th. But Verstappen is still out there. Here comes Lando Norris. Been a messy lap. Lando comes to the line. It's only 7th. A disaster for Norris, but here comes Verstappen, who does it by half a 10th on medium tyres. A 1:11.0. Max Verstappen on provisional pole. No! George Russell does a 1:10.8 and is on pole. What a lap. That is one of the best laps you will see all year. Where on earth has that come from? 1:10.899, a 10th and a half quicker than Verstappen. That right there is why we call George Russell Mr. Saturday. And that's right there why he is one of the best on the grid. Pole position for the second year in a row here in Montreal. Maybe later he'll get a penalty for that thing with Tsunoda, but that is an absolutely stunning lap. George Russell is on pole position for the Canadian Grand Prix, and alongside him on the front row, Max Verstappen. After all the controversy of the last Grand Prix, Russell and Verstappen on the front row. That's exactly what we want. Oscar Piastri 3rd. Kimi Antonelli 4th. A great session for Mercedes. Leclerc, by the way, did not decide to go for a final lap, so Leclerc ended up 8th. A poor effort from him. Leclerc complaining about the dirty air for the reason being for his oversteer moment, but no, the dirty air was not the reason that happened. He just got it wrong. But let's go through your final finishing order of this brilliant qualifying session in Canada. George Russell somehow on pole and takes Mercedes' first pole of 2025. Is this the start of a championship charge from George Russell? Max Verstappen 2nd. He will be very happy with that, Verstappen. after the weekend he's had. Piastri third, not a disaster for Piastri, but definitely there was more out there for him. Antonelli fourth, Hamilton fifth. Good job by Hamilton in that session, and a good final lap for the first time in a while. Fernando Alonso sixth. What a brilliant weekend he's having. Alonso sixth in the Aston Martin, out qualifying Lando Norris, who has had an absolute shit show of a performance yet again in qualifying, and that is again why we don't think here that Norris is going to win the championship, because he just fails to deliver way too much. Charles Leclerc 8th, poor lap from him. Hadjar 9th. Hadjar, though, will probably get a 3-place grid penalty. Alex Albon in 10th, and then Tsunoda 11th, Colapinto 12th, Hulkenberg 13th, Behrman 14th, Ocon 15th, Bortoletto 16th, Sainz 17th, Stroll 18th, Lawson 19th, and Pierre Gasly 20th, but it will be Yuki Tsunoda lining up at the very back. And let's hope, for the race's sake, that George Russell will keep his pole position. What a brilliant lap and conclusion there to qualifying. So, quickly guys, before I go, and I will be heading off in a few minutes because I need to have my dinner. Let me just ask you guys, who is your driver of the day for qualifying in Canada? And for me, there is only one option for driver of the day. It has to be George Russell. Just, yeah, an amazing effort from him. Verstappen, I'm going to put in there. Alonso. And I'm going to put Franco Colapinto in the poll because I think he deserves a shout out. But there you go. Who is your driver of the day for qualifying? Let me know in that poll. For the race tomorrow, though, God, cannot wait for it. It's going to be an epic Grand Prix, where we're going to have a 3-team fight for the win between Russell, Verstappen, and Piastri. Pretty much like last year's Grand Prix, except it will be sunny and dry rather than very soaking wet as it was last year. But in clear air, McLaren should have the quickest car tomorrow. Can they utilise that, though? Can they show that enough and deliver on what the pace deserves, which really is the race win? Again, I am amazed at what Russell has done there. Mercedes have been surprisingly quite a bit quicker this weekend than I expected, but for him to deliver pole there, just amazing. Absolutely amazing. Let me have a look at some comments here before we come to the end here. He's called Mr. Saturday because he can only deliver on a Saturday. No, sometimes he delivers on a Sunday as well. Rick saying George Russell. I didn't realise actually how much his last name does sound like that. Todd says Max takes the lead before the first lap is over. We'll see. It's a very short run down to turn 1. I think with Max, though, tomorrow, I think the key for him is just at least holding on to second, because I don't think he needs to get into the lead at turn 1 to win tomorrow. I think the key for him is just keeping McLaren back. And then when it comes to overtaking Russell, if he is to overtake Russell, he needs to do it in a way that, you know, he can then, similar to what he did in Spain last year, where he can overtake Russell, sprint off into the distance, and McLaren then get held up behind Russell. But Max Verstappen absolutely can win tomorrow's Grand Prix. Whether he will or not is a different question. But I cannot wait for tomorrow's race. We're going to have lots of action, lots of overtaking. Danny saying, why did you not say that? There was still a driver behind Max before you said he got pole. I had forgotten that Russell was still out there. And the reason I'd forgotten is because on the timing screen, FOM, on the broadcast, they didn't show Russell's sector times and lap time thing until literally he was about to cross the line. So that's why I thought Max had got pole. And I'll be honest, I didn't really think Russell was going to get pole. But he, again, produced an absolutely bonkers final lap. Rook saying, looking forward to the Pirelli tyre guide tomorrow, see what tyres they got left. Yeah, we'll make sure to go through that tomorrow. And because obviously it was a crucial thing in the last Grand Prix. So yeah, I'll make sure to... I'll probably show it on screen tomorrow in the build-up to the race, so that you guys can all know who has what left. Laurie Rastogi saying, Norris turning into a number 2 driver. Absolutely. I mean, if you're McLaren, you can't rely on Lando at the moment. You just cannot. He just consistently fails to deliver when it matters. And you can't rely on people like that. I mean, that's ultimately the beginning of why Sebastian Vettel ended up getting worse and ended up leaving Ferrari, because Vettel got to a point where he kept making too many mistakes and consistently was failing to deliver. And then eventually, he got worse and left. But obviously Vettel was a lot closer to the end of his career than obviously Lando is. But again, from McLaren's side, you cannot rely on drivers like that. Kirby saying, great qualifying. Russell, Alonso and Hamilton, good sessions. Absolutely. And I think I'll finish up the poll in the chat, because there is a clear winner after 47 votes. I asked you guys driver of the day for qualifying, and 53% of the vote has gone to George Russell, 31% for Verstappen, 12% for Alonso, and 2% for Franco Colapinto. But guys, thank you very much for coming along for this qualifying watch along for the Canadian Grand Prix. And make sure to join me tomorrow, 2 hours before the start of the race at 5 p.m. UK time, for the race watch along for the Canadian Grand Prix. Just to say, it will be a solo race watch along. Niblo, unfortunately, won't be able to join us because of the timing, obviously, of the Grand Prix for the Australian fans is obviously quite bad, and Asian fans as well. That's why Astro and Brabham are not in the chat, I think, today, because, again, of the timing of the session, which is understandable. But yeah, he won't be along tomorrow, but he will be back definitely for the Austrian Grand Prix in a fortnight. So yeah, it'll be a solo race watch along, and again, I'll be live at 5 p.m. tomorrow UK time for the race watch along. So make sure to join me for that. Cheers for coming along for today's watch along. Make sure to smash the like button before you go if you haven't already. Make sure to subscribe for more content like this. And until tomorrow's Canadian Grand Prix, which should be a very exciting, fun race. Cannot wait to see what goes down tomorrow in Montreal. Make sure to join us for it. And until tomorrow, guys, at 5 p.m. UK time, it has been me, Chazza HD. Goodbye.